Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today we're doing a Weather Painter deck profile. So this is a really interesting deck that basically is a amazing control based deck that can get all sorts of insane plays on your side of the field. I'm really excited to show you guys this deck because I have really worked on this deck since the last profile of this because it's absolutely insane and can make some insane boards where it can even control your opponent and shut them down so they pretty much can't even play Yu-Gi-Oh! And even if they establish an insane board, this deck can even bypass and get through those as well with the way that I've built this deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below where we have all those awesome rewards like getting your name shirts for every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, or even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hand. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of the Weather Painter Snow. So Weather Painter Snow is the main one that you're going to want to get to your hand as quickly as possible because she has one of the best effects that when this card is normal summon, you get to place, now keyword, place one weather spell or trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap card zone. Now, why is that important? Because the ruling states that with the effect of your anti-spell fragrance, the anti-spell fragrance says both players must set spell or trap cards before activating them. However, with anti-spell fragrance in this deck, it says you have to activate them, but this is placing, so it's totally different, so it just bypasses the effect, which is kind of neat. It also has the ability that you can only use the effect of this card once per turn, and once per turn during the standby phase of the turn after this card was banished from the field to activate one of the weather card's effects, you can special summon this card back from being banished, which a lot of your weathers share that ability. We then play 3 copies of the Weather Painter Thunder. Weather Painter Thunder is actually my favorite of all the Weather Painters, and it has the ability that you can send one face-up continuous spell or trap you control to the graveyard to place one weather spell or trap directly from your deck face-up in your spell and trap card zone. And then it also shares the ability that during the standby phase after this card was banished, you could special summon it back if you used it for the effect of the weather card. We then play 2 copies of the Weather Painter Cloud. The Weather Painter Cloud is pretty cool because if another face-up weather card you control is in your graveyard, is sent to the graveyard, then you can target up 2 weather spells or traps in your graveyard, place them face-up in your spell and trap card zone. So this card's really good at helping you recover your weather spells or traps back onto your side of the field. We then play 2 copies of the Weather Painter Sun. Weather Painter Sun is kind of cool too because if this card's in your graveyard, you can send one face-up continuous spell or trap you control to the graveyard to special on this card in defense position. And if you get to place one weather spell or trap from your hand face-up in your spell and trap card zone, which is a really good effect just to be able to get you additional plays and get you additional monsters on your side of the field to use your weather spells or traps. I bumped Rain down to 1 from my previous builds. Rain is pretty good because if this card is special summon, you get to place one weather spell or trap from your hand and face up your spell and trap card zone. But other than that, it's really just a placeholder card as an additional weather card in the deck and additional names. We then play a single copy of the Weather Painter Aurora. Aurora is pretty good in the deck because when this card is normal summoned, you get to place one weather spell or trap from your hand, deck, or graveyard face up in your spell and trap card zone, and your opponent cannot target the weather spells or traps you control with card effects. Also, they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects either, so this card just totally protects your back row, which is really good that are weather cards. And it also has the ability that once per turn during the standby phase after this card was banished from your side of the field to activate the effect of a weather card, you can special summon this card back, which is a pretty good effect. The only downside of this card is it is a level 6, so it does require a tribute, but there's a lot of cards in the deck that easily get this card out anyways. We then play, to break our opponent's boards, I do play a Kaiju package in here, and we have a lot of cards in the deck that bounce cards, so it's really easy to just basically bounce the Kaijus back to your hand, so you don't have to deal with your opponent attacking you with them, which is why you play this package. So you're going to be playing a single copy of the Thunder King, Dolgaran, the Raiden the Multidimensional Kaiju, Gandarla, and a single copy of Gameciel. I play these 5 because I don't want to draw any more than this. If I open up with at least 1, I'm okay, because it's going to be able to deal with an opponent's card. And then you have Thunder Canvas that's going to be able to bounce them back to your hand, which is really nice to be able to just bounce those back to your hand, which we'll get into in just a minute. But basically the reason you play these is to get rid of cards like Borreload Savage Dragon, dealing with Dragoons. There's a bunch of cards that that the Kaiju's just totally out, and that you just don't care about your opponent's board at that point. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. So Pot of Extravagance is really good in the deck too, because you're going to be able to dig into the deck to be able to get the exact cards that you need very, very quickly in the deck. Now, this card is really good because you don't really care about the extra deck that much. You're basically just trying to get your weather cards on your side of the field as quickly as possible to be able to deal with your opponent's cards and be able to control the board. So this card's really good. We then play 3 copies of the Weather Snowy Canvas. Weather Snowy Canvas is pretty good because you basically have, for each weather painter, you have a canvas card that's going to be able to get their effects off. So basically what this card does is the weather effect monsters in your main monster zone of the cards in columns and adjacent columns you control gain the following effect. So what does that mean? Let me explain that very quickly, how these actually work. So if I have this, for example, here, and I have, say, a snow here, a snow here, and a snow here, then all 3 of these snows gain that ability. However, the copy of Thunder that's over here to the left is not in an adjacent zone. So the zone directly above and the adjacent zones gain the ability of this card, but not the Thunder. Thunder would not gain it. However, if it was here, then these 3 would gain it, but this one would not, which is very important to consider when you're playing Weather, because Weather is a very interesting deck that card placement actually matters, which is kind of neat about the deck. So what does that actually do? So what this card does is you can banish this card, which it's saying the monster gains this effect. You can banish the monster to be able to add the weather card from your deck to your hand. Also, you cannot add cards from your deck to your hand for the rest of the turn except by drawing them, which is a really good effect just to be able to add anything that you need from your deck to your hand. We then play a single copy of Rainy Canvas. Rainy Canvas has the ability that you can banish this card to be able to target 1 spell or trap your opponent controls and return it to the hand, which is pretty good to just be able to bounce stuff, which is kind of neat, but you just have to bounce the monsters, which is why the monsters say that you're going to be able to special summon them back during the next standby phase after you use them for the effect of the weather card, which is always going to be your canvases. We play a single copy of Dimensional Fissure. Dimensional Fissure is really going to hurt our opponent more than us, so you play this card as a 1-of. And then we play 2 copies of Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen. Valhalla is really good because it special summons out a weather monster from your hand that's a fairy, because all of your monsters are fairies anyways, so it's really easy just to special summon them to have them on your side of the field to use your canvases with them, which is super nice. So that's it for your spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, same thing as Dimensional Fissure. You're playing a single copy of Macrocosmos. Macrocosmos hurts our opponent a lot more than us, so you play this card as a 1-of in the deck to be able to just deal with your opponent, and it's a really good card overall. You then play a single copy of Skill Drain because, again, it's gonna hurt our opponent a lot more than us, so you play this card as a 1-of in the deck because it's just super good just to be able to shut your opponent down. You play 2 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance. Anti-Spell Fragrance is really good in the deck too because we place our cards on the field, we don't activate them, which is kind of neat. We then play 3 copies of Drowning Mirror Force. Drowning Mirror Force is ridiculously good in this deck because you're going to be bouncing your weather cards off your side of the field a lot in this deck. So this card is really good to have because if you pop off one time with this card and your opponent attacks you directly and you activate this and it resolves, you've pretty much won the game because your opponent is not going to be able to come back from you shuffling their entire board back into the deck because they just can't. Like, it's usually impossible for them to come back from a board that has just been totally shuffled back. Like, imagine that they've committed like 5 or 6 cards into a monster or into a Link 4, like a Boral Sword, and they attack you with the Boral Sword thinking, oh, I can attack them directly and I'm going to win, and then you flip Drowning Mirror Force and you bounce their Boral Sword and their whatever else they have, their Double Dantes, if you're playing against Burning Abyss, or Break Sword, or anything that they have, and you just flip this and it's game. Like, you've won because they can't recover from it, which is why I play this card as a 3-of in this deck as well. The only thing that I would consider dropping this for is 3 copies of Dimensional Shifter, because Dimensional Shifter hurts our opponent a lot more than it hurts us. We then play 3 copies of the Weather Rainbow Canvas. Rainbow Canvas is kind of neat. It's the newest card that they've released for this deck, and I really wish that they would release the red, or the Weather Painter red, because we don't have a red one at all, which is kind of weird. But this has the ability you can only control 1 of it, and if your opponent controls a monster's quick effect, you can banish this card, which is the monster, to special summon the weather monster with a different name from your deck, and also you cannot special summon other monsters from the deck for the rest of the term, which is not that big of a deal because we're only going to special summon once anyways, but this card's really good at getting the exact weather monster you need and helping you swarm the board so you can link climb if needed. We then play 3 copies of Thunder Canvas. Thunder Canvas is by far my favorite because it has the ability that at the start of the damage step, if you're battling a monster, you can banish this card, which is the weather monster, and then return that opponent's monster to the hand, which is basically going to bounce whatever your monster is attacking into. So for example, If I have a copy of Snow above my copy of Thunder, and my opponent attacks into the Snow, which has 0 attack, I can banish the Snow and bounce my opponent's monster back to the hand, which is why the copies of the Kaijus are so important in the deck, because they don't activate any negations, they don't deal with anything. So this card's really good at getting your Kaijus back to reuse them over and over again. Same thing with your copy of Drowning Mirror Force. Your opponent attacks into you with a Kaiju that you've given them with a Drowning Mirror Force, and you just flip it, and it's like, okay, cool, I'm going to get my Kaiju back into my deck, and I'm going to shuffle it, and then I'm going to draw it again and use it against you again, which is kind of cool. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, I'm going to be playing 2 copies of the Weather Painter Rainbow. Now, I will mention, you guys, if there's anything in the extra deck that you don't want to play, you can drop it, because you're not going to go into the extra deck all that much anyways. I usually just summon out my weather cards, and then I'll go into maybe, I say, a copy of Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avermax to OTK my opponent. But what this card does is it has the ability that when an opponent's monster would be special summoned, or would special summon a monsters, then quick effect, send this link card to the graveyard to negate the summon. And if you do, destroy that monsters. And then once per turn, during the standby phase of the turn that after this card was banished on the field to activate the effect of the weather cards, then you get to special summon this banished card. And then any monster, the effect monsters that this card points to, gain the effect of when a card or effect is activated, you can banish this card to negate the activation of Do Destroy It. So it's a really good card to be able to get on your side of the field, to have 3 of your monsters to be able to have negations, which is really amazing. And this card can single-handedly win you games. We then play 2 copies of Appaloosa. Appaloosa is really good because you can summon this card pretty easily in the deck. It is a fairy monster, and also gives you multiple negations. We play 2 copies of Crusadia Avermax. Avermax is the main OTK piece of the deck that I like to play in the deck. It's really easy to summon because when this card is link summon to your side of the field, your opponent cannot target this card with card effects. And also if you summon this with Masquerena, Masquerena is going to help you out a lot with this card as well, because it's going to be able to stop your opponent from also destroying this card by card effects as well. And also it has the ability that once per turn during the damage calculation, this card battles a special summon monster, then you make this card gain attack equal to that monster's original attack during the damage calculation only. And if this link summon card you control is sent to the graveyard, then you can shuffle a card on the field into the deck, which is a really good effect as well. This card has literally no downsides. We then play 2 copies of Unicorn just to be able to shuffle stuff back on our opponent's side of the field. 2 copies of Phoenix to be able to pop spells or traps, which is really good in this deck. We play 2 copies of Masquerena. Masquerena is just going to be able to go in your copy of Avermax or Appaloosa using a Phoenix and that. And then we play a single copy of Alamirage. Alamirage is kind of like the one-of that I just kind of threw in here. I don't really have anything else for this slot, so I kind of threw in this. I kind of consider playing in a copy of Cerberus over this, but it's still a pretty good one-of in the deck. And then I play a single copy of number 75 by Moozling Gossip Shadow, because it is a level 3 or rank 3 that you can detach 2 materials from this to be able to make both players draw a card instead of negate an effect on your opponent's side of the field, which is pretty good. And then the single copy of Breaksword to pop 2 cards on the field, which is popping a card on my side and a card on your side. And I get a lot of card economy in this deck, so I'm not worried about it. I get a lot of cards on my side of the field that I just really don't have to worry about if I pop 1 card and then I get rid of one of yours, because it's going to deal a lot more to you than me. So it's a really good deck, and I hope you guys give this deck a shot, because it's really fun to play around with. It's fairly budget to play with this deck too, because all the cards are like really cheap, except I think the copies of Extravagance are maybe 20 each right now, maybe 30 each. I don't know off the top of my head, but you can play, I guess you can play Desires if you want to play Desires over that, and maybe an Upstart Goblin 2 Desires and an Upstart if you want to go a little bit more budget, guys. But that's pretty much it for the deck. I hope you guys don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.